You're tired, not the kind of tired that sleep can fix, but the bone-deep exhaustion that comes from performing yourself into oblivion. Every notification demands a response. Every silence feels like failure. Every moment without engagement becomes evidence of your irrelevance. You've been conditioned to believe that your worth is measured in words, your value calculated in reactions, your existence validated only when witnessed. This is the burden of being perpetually seen. You wake up already performing, crafting the perfect response before your feet hit the floor. Your mind races through conversations that haven't happened yet, rehearsing reactions to scenarios that may never unfold. You've become a slave to the rhythm of response, dancing to the beat of other people's expectations, living in the exhausting theater of constant availability. But here's what they never told you. This isn't connection. This is performance anxiety, disguised as social engagement. You're not building relationships. You're feeding a machine that devours your authentic self and spits out a hollow version of who you think you should be. Every immediate response is a small surrender of your power. Every reactive word is a piece of your sovereignty sold for the illusion of belonging. The modern world has weaponized your need to be heard against your need to be respected. It has convinced you that silence equals absence, that delayed response equals disrespect, that strategic withdrawal equals weakness. You've been programmed to fill every void with noise, to answer every question immediately, to prove your worth through the speed of your availability rather than the depth of your presence. This constant performance is killing your power from the inside out. You're bleeding energy into endless streams of reactive communication, pouring your life force into conversations that drain rather than sustain you. You've forgotten what it feels like to sit in comfortable silence, to let a question hang in the air, to allow tension to build before you choose how to respond. You weren't born this way. You were trained this way, conditioned to believe that your silence makes others uncomfortable. So you learn to fill the space with words that mean nothing. Taught that immediate response equals respect, so you sacrifice thoughtfulness for speed, convinced that being on all the time makes you valuable. So you forgot the profound power of being selectively unavailable. Every ping, every notification, every expectation of immediate response is a small act of violence against your inner authority. You've allowed the external world to dictate the rhythm of your internal state. You've surrendered the sacred space between stimulus and response, that holy ground where choice lives, where power is born, where transformation becomes possible. The exhaustion you feel isn't from being too busy, it's from being too available. It's from giving away your presence so freely that it has lost all value. It's from responding so quickly that your words carry no weight. Your opinions hold no mystery. Your thoughts create no anticipation. You've become predictable, and predictable people are easily controlled, easily dismissed, easily forgotten. This is the prison of perpetual visibility, always on display, never at rest, constantly performing an identity that isn't even yours. You've confused being seen with being valued, being available with being important, being reactive with being alive. But that version of yourself, the one that jumps at every stimulus, responds to every provocation, fills every silence with noise, that's not your authentic power. That's your conditioned weakness masquerading as social competence. The weight you carry isn't the weight of responsibility. It's the weight of other people's expectations. It's the accumulated burden of 1,000 small surrenders each time you chose to respond when you could have chosen to remain silent. Each time you filled the space when you could have held the tension. Each time you performed availability when you could have demonstrated selectivity. You're not antisocial if you don't respond immediately. You're not rude if you take time to consider your words. You're not weak if you choose silence over reaction. You've been gaslighted into believing that your natural impulse toward reflection is somehow a character flaw, that your desire for meaningful over immediate communication is a social disability. But what if the opposite were true? What if your exhaustion is actually evidence of your untapped power? What if your discomfort with constant performance is your inner authority trying to break free? What if the very thing you've been taught to fear, strategic silence, is actually your greatest source of influence? The illusion runs deeper than you realize. You've been sold a lie wrapped in social conditioning, that immediate response equals respect, that availability equals value, that reaction equals engagement. But this is exactly backwards. The people who command the most attention are those who give it most selectively. The voices that carry the most weight are those that speak least frequently. The presence that creates the most impact is the one that appears least desperately. You've been operating under the false belief that communication is about filling space, but real communication is about creating space. You think engagement means constant interaction, but true engagement means meaningful selection. You believe that being heard requires being loud, but being remembered requires being rare. Every time you respond immediately, you're training others that your words have no weight, your thoughts require no consideration, your presence holds no mystery. You're teaching the world that you're always available, always accessible, always ready to dance to the rhythm of their needs rather than the rhythm of your own authority. This isn't connection, this is codependency. This isn't communication, this is compulsion. This isn't engagement, this is enslavement to the expectations of others. You've confused being responsive with being responsible, being available with being valuable, being reactive with being alive, that the fastest responders get the least respect. Think about it. The people who jump at every message, who answer every question immediately, who fill every silence with nervous chatter, these are not the people others seek out for wisdom. These are not the voices that create anticipation. These are not the presences that command rooms. Real influence operates on a different frequency entirely. It understands that tension creates attention, that scarcity generates value, that mystery builds magnetism. The moment you become predictable in your responses, you become controllable in your relationships. The moment you make yourself constantly available, you make yourself consistently irrelevant. You've been programmed to believe that delayed response equals disrespect, but delayed response actually equals discernment. You think strategic silence means you're being antisocial, but strategic silence means you're being selective. You believe that taking time to formulate your thoughts is somehow rude, but taking time to formulate your thoughts is the most respectful thing you can do for yourself and for the quality of what you offer others. The people who have trained you to respond immediately are the same people who will lose interest the moment you do. They don't want your quick responses because they value your thoughts. They want your quick responses because they need the validation of your attention. They've turned you into a drug dealer for their need to feel important, and your immediate responses are the fix they're seeking. But every time you give them that fix, you diminish your own power. Every quick response is a small surrender of your sovereignty. Every immediate availability is a tiny betrayal of your inner authority. You're not being kind, you're being used. You're not being helpful, you're being harvested. This is the illusion of response, that it means connection when it actually means control, that it builds relationships when it actually builds dependency, that it demonstrates care when it actually demonstrates compulsion. You've been convinced that your worth is tied to your speed of response, but your worth is actually tied to the depth of your consideration. The most powerful people you know don't respond immediately. They respond intentionally. They don't fill silence, they create it. They don't chase attention, they cultivate it. They understand that in a world of noise, the person who masters silence becomes the most magnetic voice in the room. 500 years ago, Niccolo Machiavelli understood something about power that modern society has forgotten. True authority doesn't announce itself, it demonstrates itself through strategic restraint. In The Prince, he wrote about the dangerous art of appearing less informed than you are, of knowing more than you reveal, of holding cards close to your chest not out of fear, but out of calculated wisdom. Machiavelli understood that power is not about dominating conversations, it's about controlling the terms on which conversations happen. It's not about having the last word, it's about deciding which words deserve your response. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room, it's about being the voice that others quiet down to hear. This is strategic silence, the deliberate withholding of immediate response to create space for intention, consideration, and psychological positioning. Machiavelli knew that those who speak first often speak from emotion, while those who speak last speak from strategy. He understood that in the theater of human interaction, timing is everything, and the person who controls the timing controls the interaction. The prince who responds to every provocation loses his mystery. The leader who answers every question immediately loses his asterisk. Authority. The person who fills every silence loses his magnetism. Machiavelli taught that what makes a leader compelling is not what he reveals, but what he chooses to conceal. Not what he says, but what he leaves unsaid. Not how quickly he responds, but how thoughtfully he considers. Strategic silence isn't passive, it's profoundly active. It's the conscious choice to let tension build rather than immediately resolve it. It's the deliberate decision to create space for others to reveal themselves while you maintain your positional advantage. It's the calculated withholding of your thoughts until you can deliver them with maximum impact rather than minimum consideration. Machiavelli understood that people are more influenced by what they imagine than by what they know. When you respond immediately, you eliminate imagination. When you're always available, you remove mystery. When you fill every silence, you destroy the psychological space where fascination lives. The prince who makes himself too available becomes common. The authority who explains himself too quickly becomes questionable. The person who shares every thought becomes predictable. Machiavelli knew that power requires distance. Authority demands selectivity, and influence needs mystery to survive. This isn't about being manipulative, it's about being strategic. It's not about playing games, it's about understanding that every interaction is already a game. And most people are playing it unconsciously. Strategic silence is conscious participation in the dynamics that are happening anyway. It's choosing to be intentional about something that others are leaving to chance. Machiavelli taught that the most dangerous person in any room is the one who speaks least, but observes most, while others are busy performing, revealing, explaining, justifying. The strategically silent person is learning, positioning, calculating, choosing. They're not absent from the interaction. They're operating from a position of psychological advantage within it. When you master Machiavellian silence, you stop being reactive and start being selective. You stop being available and start being valuable. You stop filling space and start creating it. You transform from someone who responds to the rhythm of others to someone who sets the rhythm for others to follow. This is the difference between being heard and being remembered, between making noise and making impact, between being present in the conversation and being powerful within it. Machiavelli understood that true influence doesn't come from what you say. It comes from making others wonder what you're thinking. Your absence becomes more powerful than your presence. When you understand the psychology of magnetic withdrawal, the human mind is wired to fill voids, to complete patterns, to solve mysteries. When you're always available, there's no void to fill. When you're completely predictable, there's no pattern to complete. When you reveal everything, there's no mystery to solve. But strategic absence creates psychological tension. It activates the part of the human brain that seeks completion, that craves understanding, that needs to know. Your selective unavailability becomes a magnet for attention because it creates the very thing that immediate availability destroys: curiosity. This isn't about being absent, it's about being selectively present. It's not about disappearing, it's about appearing with intention. It's not about being unavailable, it's about making your availability valuable. When you're always there, your presence means nothing. When you're strategically there, your presence means everything. The psychology of magnetic absence operates on scarcity principle. What's rare becomes valuable. What's limited becomes desired. What's selective becomes sought after. You've been programmed to believe that scarcity is artificial, but in the realm of attention and influence, scarcity is the natural state of anything truly valuable. Think about the people who have the most impact on you. They're not the ones who are constantly available, constantly responding, constantly present. They're the ones whose presence feels like a gift because it's not guaranteed, whose words carry weight because they're not wasted, whose attention feels valuable because it's not freely given to everyone. When you master the art of strategic absence, you stop being a commodity and start being a choice. You stop being background noise and start being a signal worth tuning into. You stop being constantly available and start being specifically valuable. The people who are always on create no anticipation. There's no excitement in engaging with someone who's guaranteed to respond immediately, predictably, constantly, but someone who chooses when to engage, who considers before responding, who creates space before filling it. This person becomes magnetic precisely because they understand the power of psychological tension. Your selective unavailability forces others to consider the value of your presence. Your strategic silence makes others appreciate the weight of your words. Your calculated absence makes others recognize the gift of your attention. This isn't manipulation, it's natural human psychology working in your favor instead of against you. When you're always available, you train others to take you for granted. When you're never available, you train others to stop trying to reach you. But when you're selectively available, you train others to value the moments when you choose to be present. The magnetic power of strategic absence isn't about playing hard to get. It's about actually becoming hard to get. It's not about pretending to be busy, it's about being genuinely selective about how you invest your time and energy. It's not about creating artificial scarcity, it's about recognizing that your presence, your words, your attention are naturally scarce resources that shouldn't be wasted. The psychological shift changes everything. Instead of desperately trying to fill every silence, you allow silence to create its own gravity. Instead of immediately responding to every stimulus, you create space for your response to have weight. Instead of being constantly available, you become strategically present. The people who command the most attention understand this paradox. To be more influential, be less available. To be more interesting, be less predictable. To be more valued, be more selective. Your magnetic absence creates the very desire that your constant presence destroys. Predictability is the death of power. The moment others can predict your response, they can control your reaction. The moment they know exactly when and how you'll engage, they can manipulate the terms of that engagement. The moment you become a known quantity, you become a controllable asset rather than an autonomous force. Unpredictability isn't chaos, it's calculated variance designed to keep others psychologically off balance in the most productive way possible. It's the strategic breaking of patterns that others have grown comfortable predicting. It's the deliberate introduction of uncertainty into interactions where others expect certainty. When you respond to messages at the same time every day, you create a pattern that others can exploit. When you always engage with the same intensity, you become emotionally predictable. When you react to provocations in the same way every time, you become strategically controllable. Your patterns become your prison, and those who recognize your patterns hold the keys. But architectural unpredictability, the thoughtful design of varied response, creates a different dynamic entirely. Sometimes you respond immediately, sometimes you wait, sometimes you engage deeply, sometimes you remain surface level. Sometimes you're extensively available, sometimes you're selectively present. This variance keeps others engaged not because they know what to expect, but because they don't. The architecture of unpredictability operates on intermittent reinforcement, the most powerful psychological conditioning pattern known to behavioral science. It's why gambling is addictive, why toxic relationships are magnetic, why uncertain rewards are more compelling than guaranteed ones. When others can't predict when they'll receive your attention becomes exponentially more valuable. This isn't about being erratic, it's about being strategically varied. It's not about being inconsistent, it's about being consciously unpredictable. There's a rhythm to effective unpredictability, a pattern to strategic pattern breaking that keeps others psychologically engaged without making them feel manipulated or confused. Master communicators understand timing as an art form. They know when to respond immediately to create impact, when to delay response to build tension, when to remain silent to maintain mystery. They vary their availability not randomly, but strategically, creating a psychological dynamic that keeps others invested in the interaction. When you become architecturally unpredictable, you stop being a supporting character in other people's narratives and start being the main character in your own. You stop reacting to the rhythm others set and start setting the rhythm others react to. You stop being the person who responds and start being the person who creates the conditions for response. This strategic unpredictability transforms you from someone who fills space in conversations to someone who creates space for meaningful exchange, from someone who reacts to the energy others bring to someone who sets the energy that others respond to. From someone who follows the conversational script to someone who writes it. The goal isn't to confuse or frustrate others, it's to create dynamic interactions that remain psychologically engaging. It's to break the stale patterns of predictable communication that drain energy and create boring, transactional relationships. It's to introduce enough strategic uncertainty to keep interactions alive, fresh, compelling. When you master the architecture of unpredictability, you become fascinating rather than familiar, intriguing rather than ordinary, magnetic rather than mundane. People become curious about your next move rather than bored by your predictable responses. They start paying attention to your patterns rather than taking your availability for granted. This is how you shift from being managed by others' expectations to managing others' experiences of you, from being controlled by predictable patterns to creating compelling dynamics that others want to engage with, from being strategically forgettable to being psychologically unforgettable. Asterisk.